Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 10 of Game Develop Repeat. I'm I'm extremely excited to be doing episode 10 of this show. It's really cool to me that I've been making this, that I've been publishing it. It's like an exciting process. If you ever wanted to like just create something, just do it. Just get in there, create it, publish it. Like nothing bad happens. You just start making interesting stuff, and people start to see it and you go, "Oh, wow, a few people have watched this. This is exciting." So, anyway, um get in there and make some stuff, like I always say. Okay, let's get into this episode and talk about a game that was very, very impactful on me growing up. I played a ton of time, put so many hours into Warcraft 3. So let's talk about Warcraft 3, Warcraft 3 The Frozen Throne, and all of the custom maps that you could play as well. For anybody who has not played Warcraft 3 or not seen gameplay or heard of it or whatever, because I realize the game is a bit old now. There's a part of me that's like, no, of course they've all heard of this. It's Warcraft 3. Like, no, somebody like I was just so deep into it that I just assume, like, if I'm walking down the street, I'm like, yeah, that person's probably played Warcraft 3. Everybody's heard of this game. Everybody's played it. Somebody's like, oh, I play a lot of Candy Crush. I'm like, oh, okay, so you must have grown up playing Warcraft 3, right? Like, I just assume everybody has an experience with it. Um, Sorry, for anybody who hasn't played Warcraft 3, quick overview of the game. It is a competitive war strategy game, so you can think of it in the same genre as like your Age of Empires, your Age of Mythology. That might be a little bit of a deep cut. Empire Earth, StarCraft for sure. Same company there. You can think of it as that sort of game, but you've got four different races. You've got the humans, the undead, the night elves, and the orcs. And it's very well balanced between those races. So any one of those races, you're matched up with somebody else, you have a path to victory. Sometimes it's a really frustrating path to victory. It is, a little bit you'll get used to playing a certain way, and then you'll go up against the orcs and you'll be like, I have no idea how to beat the orcs. I can never freaking beat the orcs. Why can I never beat the orcs? What are these orc players doing? That adds to the fun though. Like, you've got to figure it out. It's exciting. You can think of it as StarCraft in a more of a fantasy setting. It does have a single player campaign. I think where the game really shines is its online multiplayer, or really shined, I should say. I should really talk about this game in the past tense in a lot of ways. We'll talk about that. I think it really shined in its multiplayer and its custom maps. And there is the single player campaign is good, but it's not what I remember about the game. I'll just put it that way. What I remember about the game is the online combat and the custom maps too, although I was much more driven by the competitive aspect than I was by the creative custom map side of things. All that being said, quick disclaimer about this game. I kind of already alluded to it, but in my mind, there's not a way to play the game that I am talking about. There was a release of Warcraft 3 Reforged. From what I've heard, not a great re-release. It was not well received. I don't know if they've improved it significantly since then. I'm not really worried about it, honestly. I'm not thinking about that at this point in my life. I don't have enough time to dedicate to playing Warcraft 3 anymore. I've already spent so much of my life on this game. Do I miss it? Yes. Is there a part of me that wishes I could still play it that way? Of course. But those days are past us. Anyway, this is not an endorsement of that re-release of this game. I'm not interested in that. I like whatever. That's just not what we're here for. That game, whatever. I can't talk about it. Haven't played it. But I can talk about Warcraft 3 Old School, The Frozen Throne, right? Which was the expansion pack to it. And I absolutely will. I had to take notes before starting this episode because I've got too much to say. First thing we're going to talk about is the feeling of this game. What does this game make you feel? How does this game affect your feelings? I think that this game may have taken years off of my life. I think at the age of like 12, I was in danger of having a heart attack. I don't know what age I actually was when I was playing this, but I think that this game gave me so much stress and I loved it. This is a game where you open up the match. This is assuming you're fighting against another player. The moment the match starts, like literally the loading bar finishes ticking and you are just absolutely on edge, like, okay, I have to select my workers as fast as I can. I have to only get 3 of them and then click on the gold mine. And then the other 2 I have to select really quickly and put on the trees, whatever the closest tree is. And then I need to click on one worker. Once they return from the gold mine, as soon as they put their gold in, I need to grab them and do this. And I need to hit these hotkeys as quick as I can. And it looks like you are racing and typing and all this stuff as quickly as you possibly can. Oh, that cough was really loud on the microphone. I apologize. I'm going to have to fix that. You are going as quick as you can. You are absolutely just ripping through this, and it is a stress machine. And then before you know it, somebody's in your base and they're attacking you, and you're like, how did you possibly have time to get a force ready to attack me when I've like, how do you even do that? Are you even still managing your own base? What is going on? How are you micromanaging your units like this so I can't kill them? And it's so much. Anyway, that's my that's my attempt at emulating the feeling of the beginning of a Warcraft 3 match. It's intense, so intense, and it's all in this nice little fantasy setting. And the workers say like little charming things whenever you assign them a task, and the music is very nice, and it's very pleasant, actually, while also being one of the most stressful things I've ever experienced in my life. If you would like to experience those levels of stress in a different game, just by the way, Cook Serve Delicious, either the first one or the third one, I highly recommend. The second one is pretty good. It's just not as good as the other two for me. For some players, it might be better. But I definitely recommend those for stress generators if you really just want to be like in a panic. Not the same level of panic, but it's pretty close. Okay, back to Warcraft 3. That's the feeling of the game is exciting stress. It is high stakes. And also, and this was a demonic decision by whoever did this. This design decision was so brilliant and cruel. All of your wins and losses are recorded in your profile. Anybody can right-click your name in one of the lobbies and look at your profile and see your percentage of wins and losses. Warcraft 3 also had a clan system where you could get together with a bunch of other people, and the clan rating was based on like the number of wins that the overall clan had or something. I'm not that into the details on that, but clans would be like, we only accept players with 70% plus or whatever. Like they would all have these absurd, really intense rules for joining their clan. And my little brain was like, they're only accepting people who are 70%. That's an exclusive club. I have to get to 70%, which is such a bad idea. Well, not a bad idea. It's a very intense goal to want to win that percent of your matches in a game that has a rating system, which means that the more matches you win, it pushes you towards a 50% win rate. Like it's trying to... Now, admittedly, the rating system in Warcraft 3 was not very good. It was fun. It was very fun. But boy, did they just kind of throw you into an arena with somebody who had been playing way more than you and knew a lot more about war strategy than you did. There was also a guy in the game whose username was World Peace. I think that was the name of the username. Who anytime that he entered a match would just leave. You would have a competitive ranked match with him and he would just leave. But he actually had a pretty high number of wins though, because he had like the dragon icons, which are some of the hardest to get icons. You could get different icons based on your number of wins. And it was kind of like a status symbol thing, right? So he had like the lowest win percentage probably in the whole game, but he also had some of these extremely difficult, like you have to have 500 plus wins, whatever. I'm not convinced that it wasn't a bot. You know, I'm not convinced that it wasn't somebody just running a program. But anyway, maybe it was. I should look and see if there's an interview with him out there. How niche would that be? Somebody interviews this obscure Warcraft 3 player who's known for leaving the match anytime that. Yeah, that would be interesting. I would love to hear the motivation behind that. I mean, okay, back to it. So that leads into my second bullet point, which I'm already straying from the plan. Whatever. My second bullet point is competition and drive to improve. They absolutely just made me so competitive at that time. I was like, I think I already had this built in, but when I was playing this game, I was like, I've got to get good. I put everything into getting good at this game. I was so invested in getting just phenomenal at Warcraft 3. People were talking about people who were pro at the game. I didn't realize that they meant literal professionals. Like, I didn't realize that was possible. And I think maybe they didn't actually mean that at the time. I'm not sure how big the pro scene really was. I think it was starting to be a thing. It's not like pro gaming is today. It's much bigger today. But I was like, I thought that just meant really good because I was pretty young. And I was like, I want to be really good. I just want to be really good at this. And here's the interesting thing about this aspect of it. I think the game drove you to be competitive in so many different ways with its like online leaderboards and all this stuff. And I think that made something click for me where I went, oh, I want to be really good at something, right? I don't know what something clicked in my head, or I was like, I've got to work at this. Like I was trying to play it and I was like, why isn't this easier? This should be easier. Things aren't ever this hard. Why is this so hard? I like this game. I played a lot. Pretty good at it, I guess. But I was getting my butt handed to me. I was like, I should be better at this. And then I just went in. I started trying to figure out how to improve quicker and all this stuff. And I didn't really figure out a lot of the stuff until much later on when I was no longer playing Warcraft 3. But it started my like lifelong obsession with learning to improve at things quickly. Like my obsession with learning skills, actual tangible skills. And I know that's a weird way to refer to being good at a war strategy game. But it was a sequence of actions that I had to perform. It was a skill, not just knowledge. Up until that point in my life, I for some reason didn't like understand the amount of effort that had to go into building a skill versus just developing knowledge and how different those two categories are. They're both things that you got to work hard at, but in different ways. Warcraft 3 was the first place that I really learned about building skills. Music was the next place that I really learned about building skills. But I think that this game allowed me to dig deep into that drive to improve and that competitive feeling and really just soak that in and try so hard and fail so many times and keep trying. And I think that is beautiful. And I will say, just to give one little comparison point, and I know this is going to sound a little bit negative because it inherently is, but I miss that and I wish that was still around. And you know what? It's in genres that I don't play. It's in shooters. I was only comparing it to like League of Legends, where your drive to improve is a lot more difficult to, like, it's hard to put the responsibility on yourself because it's a team-based game. In War Strategy, it can just be this one-on-one match, and if you lose, it's 100% you, no doubt. But in team-based games, if you lose, you can kind of put it off on somebody else, and then you don't have to own it. And I do like the aspect of like, no, it's one-on-one. This is on you, bud. Like, I liked having that gameplay mode where it was all just totally, I knew exactly what I was accountable for, and what I was accountable for was everything. That was intense. I miss that. I really do. But we'll get into whatever. Next point. For those of you who were not super competitive, improvement obsessed children, wow, I'm destroying my voice doing this episode. I'm way too hyped. The custom maps in this game are legendary. I don't know what else to say. They created, am I overstating? I'm overstating a little bit, but they made history. They actually did. The custom maps in this game created genres. Well, they created a genre, at least. They created the MOBA genre. And there might be some argument that it would have come along anyway, and maybe somebody out there knows of one that existed pre-Warcraft 3. I kind of doubt it. I'm pretty sure Defense of the Ancients was the first MOBA. I don't see how one could have happened prior to that unless it was like a LAN thing. I could be wrong. Feel free to prove me wrong. But anyway, without Defense of the Ancients, which was a custom game made by players of Warcraft 3 and then hosted on Warcraft 3's BattleNet for players to play with each other and turned into its whole own game within the game. There are tons of people who, as I understand it, excuse me. There are tons of people who, as I understand it, played Dota exclusively. Like, that's just what they did on BattleNet. They didn't even play Warcraft 3. They were just there to play Dota and other custom games every once in a while in between Dota matches. There was some intense stuff around Dota. People had like blacklists where they would like auto ban bad players. Like, there was all this stuff. So that's just the beginning of this. There were all these other weird little custom games. You had things like God's Land, which I never hear anybody talking about, which was really cool. It was like one player acted as a god for a bunch of other players. It was almost like a dungeon master situation, right? Like, it was almost like a almost D&D inspired. I'm not really sure how to put it into words because it's been so long since I ever played it, and I only played it a few times, but I remember liking it a lot. There were a lot of tower defenses. There were a lot of just like cool little like other things that people were trying out. People were experimenting with game design and level design, like all this cool stuff. And a lot of them doing it at a very young age. It was important in the same way that like Flash games were important. People got to experiment a lot, and some of those games were stinkers. Some of them were bad. So there was some real sketchy stuff going on with the custom games every once in a while. You had to be just a little careful what custom games you joined. But it was cool, and it was community driven. The developers gave the community these tools to make all these games, right? And it was I'm a big fan of that. Like, I really appreciated the extent to which the community was able to create their own fun within this framework. Like, the developers had all this stuff, and they went, hey, what if we make it so that the players can make their own games inside of this kind of game that we've already made? Like, why not, right? We've already got all these tools. We can just shift them, and I imagine it took a decent amount of work to make it player friendly, but like, they did it. They were like, hey, let's make this let's make this approachable for our players to make their own fun, and then they'll spend more time on BattleNet, and we'll have this whole community of gamers. And this is the last comment I have in this section before we move to develop. The era of war strategies, I kind of miss it, and I think maybe I'm just not. No, I'm pretty sure I'm like this. It could be a perspective thing, but I think the era of war strategies ended a long time ago. And like I know there's been, I think there was like a really really well done Age of Empires 2 remastering. That was really nice. That got a lot of attention, and like there's some war strategies out there, but it's not. There's not the. What's the best analogy for this? The way that people play. What's the most popular one at this moment? I'm sorry, but I'm using League of Legends as an analogy. Maybe Valorant might be more relevant now, but the way that people played League of Legends is the way that I feel people played Warcraft 3. The level of love for that game and the level of intensity for it was on the same level as the most popular multiplayer games that we currently have. It was just a smaller community, but like people were all in on it. It was the game. It was like the war strategy, and it was so fun. And I hope that one day there will be another war strategy that pops off and takes hold of my life for like a year. Maybe not a year, but I feel like if a war strategy pulls it off well enough, I'll be like, all right, you know what? Fine, let's go. I hope. I don't think I have it in me anymore, but I do want other people to experience the joy that this game brought me. And I don't think that there's currently a way to do that because the culture is so different. And the games that are focused on are so different. And maybe people are experiencing the same joy in a different genre. That's great. I'm all for that. I just miss the golden era, my my golden era of Warcraft 3. Let's move into the development section of this episode. Because I want to keep myself a little bit constricted here so that I don't go off the rails like I already have. I only have one question for myself, and that is, what about a game's design drives the player to improve? So that's the facet of this that I'm most interested in, because I think it's had the biggest effect on my life, is what is it in a game that makes the player feel like, I gotta improve, I'm gonna keep improving, I want to get better. And it doesn't need to be in a long-term life-consuming kind of a way, but I am very curious about it, because I do think that that's a fundamental thing in good game design. Maybe not always. Sometimes it's just a story. Sometimes you're just going on an adventure. But there are players who want to improve. There are players like me who play getting over it, like we talked about in the last episode, and are like, I have to beat this. And then eventually I got over the feeling of having to beat it and left it alone. But that feeling of wanting to improve, that feeling that you get in Dark Souls, in Elden Ring, in Warcraft 3, in League of Legends, in Fortnite, in a lot of these big multiplayer games, how does that happen? I think here's my pitch. The first element is approachability. I think there needs to be a good starting point, and it needs to be clear from the beginning that you can get better at the game. I think there needs to be a very early thing of like, oh, look, you're already improving. Oh, look at you. That voice. I'm so over the top today. Wow, look at you. You really improved at that. Like I just feel like there needs to be a little bit of like, good job. but not like explicitly, right? The game just needs to be designed so that there's a challenge that you overcome early on, and then as you keep going, you run into things that are challenges. And some games do really well with throwing a brick wall directly at your face at the beginning, like Dark Souls. And some games do really well with like a gradual slope to it. But I do think you gotta have the player feeling like, I want to get past this. It's gonna be different for everybody. So it's really up to you. Don't worry about the player. Just worry about what somebody like you would want to play. This is me talking to myself. I'm not giving you this advice. I don't know. I think in my mind, I don't want to try to put myself in somebody else's mindset, because I'll be inaccurate. I'm not them. I'm inherently me. I can't pretend to be somebody else. I can have somebody play test a thing after I've made it. Sure, great. But best I can do is make a game and go, what does a player like me want out of this? What's going to drive a player like me? And I do think there's an element of challenge and improvement, challenge and improvement, challenge and improvement. And I think I can apply that in my own platformer, is just having this slow progression of like, hey, here's a mechanic that you're going to have to deal with. Making sure that they remember that mechanic, and then going, hey, here's a spot where that mechanic's a little more tricky to execute, but you already know about it and you remember it. So you're going to try to do it and you're going to fail. And then you're going to go, oh my God, I have to pull this off. And you're going to keep trying, right? And then there's this balance of doing that without letting the controls, like the controls shouldn't be the impediment. It needs to be the player's skill that's in the way, not the game that's in the way. That is something about Warcraft 3. The one thing that made it so good for me is we had custom hotkeys, which were completely allowed, and there was even guides on how to do them and how to make them, but other players sometimes thought we were hacking. But we had a custom hotkey set up so that we could just get the hotkeys out of the way. We didn't have to reach across the whole keyboard to execute quick things. We could just use one hand and boom, done. That was getting the game out of the way so it could just be about my own skill, right? And somebody else made those custom keys for me. One of my siblings did. Really, they made it for all of us. And that was fantastic. Because it got the game out of the way. So I think that's another part, is if you're making something where there's a ramp of difficulty, my belief is that the difficulty must come from something that feels fair. Is that the best way to phrase that? So in Warcraft 3, it comes from your competitor, the person you're fighting against. It doesn't come from clunky interfaces. I mean, it kind of did, but we resolved that with the custom hotkeys. Or like, yeah, I think that clarifies that pretty well. I think there's other examples you can look at of this, of like, does the game feel like it is playing by its own rules? There are so many times where you're like fighting an AI in a war strategy and you're like, well, the AI is cheating. Like, they know where everything is because they're an AI. How do you make an AI not cheat? Like, there's that sort of an issue with it. So what I'm getting at here is this drive to improve, this feeling of, I want to get better at this game. It has to be within the framework of a game that is treating you fairly and not full on babying you, not full on, oh, and now you're going to win this stage. Now what, if that's the motivation that you want to be in the game, if you want it to be the player has to try to overcome this challenge kind of a vibe. The other element of that is quite simply, the progression of difficulty needs to be thought about. I don't know if it has to be smooth. I don't know if it has to be hard and sudden, but it needs to be taken into account. How is your player going to feel when they run into this wall? Is it going to be great? Is it telling them to go somewhere else, or is it something they have to overcome? This is something that's way different in Elden Ring than it is in the other Dark Souls games, from what I understand, because it's much more open world. So you can hit a brick wall and go, well, then I'll just go over here instead. Thanks. Um, that's something that requires some thought too. That's oh yeah. Let's my game development super quickly this week. What I've accomplished is basically fixing tons and tons and tons of bugs in my player controller. I have spent so long on this player controller. I feel like I've spent like a month and a half, 2 months just getting this player controller working, because I have a thing where you can stick to walls. I have a thing where you automatically jump onto the wall if you get within a certain distance of it. There's just little features of it that I've had to flesh out. And one note that I want to mention is, well, two things actually. One, if somebody had told me the player controller was going to take this long, I'm not sure I would have started this project, but I'm really glad that I did start this project. Actually, I think if somebody had told me how long the player controller would have taken, I would have been like, no, it's not going to take that long. I would have started and it would have taken that long anyway. Because that's just how it goes. And then the other thing I want to mention is animation affects the player controller a lot, at least in the thing that I'm doing, because the jump animations affect the timing of when the jump triggers. And so like I've had a lot of success with doing the animation, or I would have had a lot of success with doing the animation before putting in a lot of code for the player controller. And after a certain point, I realized, oh, I have to get this animation because it's going to change the way this feels. And that's going to change my level design. So I went ahead and did some animations and did the player controller and all this stuff before I can really, really dive deep on level design, which I'm hoping is what I get to do this week. Fingers crossed. This game is starting to look like a real game. It's starting to seem like an actual game, and I am I'm over the moon and also very tired. It is development is so exhausting. There have been more than one time that I am just like just so mad at my computer, or like I'll just get exhausted and take a nap. I'll just be like, oh man, I cannot figure this out. It is nap time. I will continue later in the day, whatever, right? Sometimes it just takes it out of you. And then you just got to get back on there once you're ready. That's my mindset now. My mindset used to be, you must get this done right now. This is mandatory. No slack. Do it now. And then you know what I realized is that's called burnout. That's just burning yourself out. So instead I go, okay, all right, we'll get it done. And the best way to get it done is to rest for a second. You don't sprint through a desert during the day. Like, I don't know why that's the analogy that came to me, but like, if you're running through a desert, you don't run all day, every day. You be strategic. You travel slowly at night. So if you're having a day where you just can't do it, just pause. Just take a breather, man. I am talking to myself. Okay. That is very much advice for me. I mean, if it rings true to you, please take it. Take the breather. Take a break, Don't disappear. Don't give up. God, no. Just re-energize yourself. Just let yourself get some water in your body, get some sleep, get some air back in your lungs, and then start slowly moving across that long, arduous desert that is developing a video game. Okay, we're going to go into the final chunk of this podcast. I feel like that was almost already the final chunk. That's usually the kind of stuff I talk about there. But let's go into this last little chunk. All right, in some ways I already gave you a little bit of this sort of repeatable advice just there, but I've got another one, and it's themed around Warcraft 3. I have a feeling it might be obvious what I'm about to say, but constantly improve just a little bit. That's the repeatable behavior. And I'm not saying in the kind of way where you're like burning yourself out and driving yourself crazy like we just talked about, but constant improvement of your craft is always important, right? Just a little bit, just a touch. If you do just a touch of improvement every day, by the end of the year, you're way better. If you can do a little more, that's great. I'm a big fan of not just doing that so that you're better at the craft, but doing that because it makes it more interesting. You learn new things. Don't just get faster at the thing you're doing. Learn new ways to do the thing, right? Learn new engines. Just start peeking your head into another engine. You never know when the terms of service are going to change on the engine that you're using. You never know when you're going to want to explore a feature that's not available in your engine. You don't know. Maybe something pops up and you're like, wow, I really want to try that. Just start exploring it a little bit. Or some fundamental coding concept, whatever the thing is that you're just a little bit like, yeah, I'd like to learn a little bit about that. Just improve a tiny bit at that. It'll keep things a little fresh, do some exploration, learn some new stuff. Oh, and if you want a good way to retain information that you've learned, this is more of a knowledge thing than a skill thing. I have tried using it for skills. It's definitely more knowledge focused, but I'm using it for piano practice as well for scales. Anki, note cards. I may have already mentioned these in a previous episode. ANKI. They are like, it's spaced repetition software. So they're note cards that you say how easy or difficult it was to remember the answer to the note card, and then it will give you it for review at an appropriate time to make sure that you retain the knowledge. Super, super useful. Very high quality stuff. Huge fan of it. Okay. That is everything for today. If you stuck with me through this whole thing, thank you for listening to my extremely passionate rant about one of my favorite childhood games. That's episode 10. 10 episodes. All right. I'm so excited about it. All right. I'm gonna go, but get out there, create some stuff, have fun with it, and I will talk to you all next week.